It began with silence, a storm drain in Willow Creek, ordinary to everyone but one. Titan, a 90-pound German shepherd with eyes like amber glass, froze in his tracks. His tail stiffened, ears sharp, nose locked on the dark crack beneath the neighbor's yard. Detective John Carter, weary from years of false leads, watched the dog lower his body and refuse to move. Not a growl, not a whimper, just that immovable stare at the ground. For Carter, it was instinct honed by war. For Titan, it was a scent too deep to ignore. This was not a welfare check anymore. This was a moment the town had been waiting on for 4 long years. And it wasn't a scream that shattered the silence. It was a dog's bark, echoing down a drain that should have been empty, but wasn't. The house smelled of bleach, too clean for comfort. Cabinets gleamed, floors shined, but Titan wasn't fooled. He pressed against a sliding pantry stacked with canned food, every label aligned like soldiers in a row. Carter scanned the floor. A faint scuff mark broke the perfection. Officers pulled cans one by one until fingers found a hidden seam. A metal handle recessed into wood. The wall shifted with a click, opening into a passage that had never been meant to see daylight. Titan stiffened, growl vibrating in his chest. Carter steadied his breath. This wasn't storage. This was something else. Down the narrow stairwell, darkness gathered like a secret keeping itself. Flashlights cut into the void. The smell wasn't death, but something far worse. Neglect, dampness, unwashed years. Titan blocked the descent at first, then allowed the lights to lead. Beneath the perfect house, the truth was waiting.
Concrete walls closed in, a room without windows, without sound, without mercy. Toys scattered in corners, coloring books half-used, dolls with tangled hair. Beds sagged against the floor, stripped of springs to prevent even a squeak. And then, movement. In the far corner, beneath a blanket frayed to threads, 2 small forms shifted. Pale eyes blinked at the beams of light. It was them. Emily Hayes, once 4 years old, now skeletal and silent. Chloe Hayes, younger by a year, clinging to her sister as if welded there. They had been gone 4 years, but here they were, alive, in flesh if not untouched in spirit. No screams, no tears, just hollow silence. The kind of silence born not from safety, but from years of learning that noise was punished. Titan whined low, ears folding back. He had found what no human had: life buried under years of darkness. 4 years earlier, Willow Creek was the kind of place where sprinklers hummed on manicured lawns and children's laughter trailed across fences. On a warm Sunday afternoon, Rachel Hayes stepped inside for a phone call. 2 minutes at most. Outside, her daughters played within arm's reach of the kitchen window. Emily, age 4, traced chalk rainbows on the patio. Chloe, age 3, pumped her little legs on the swing set. When Rachel returned, the swing swayed, empty. The chalk remained untouched. The air hung too still. She searched the yard, the front porch, next door where a golden retriever often drew their giggles. Nothing. Gates were locked. Neighbors hadn't seen them. 10 minutes later, her voice ripped the neighborhood with screams. Within 20, the entire block was searching. That night, helicopters scanned the tree line, search dogs combed ditches, and the town of Willow Creek realized life here had just changed forever. By nightfall, Willow Creek's picket fences felt more like prison bars. Porch lights burned through the darkness as if brightness could push fear back. Parents locked doors twice, checked windows 3 times, tucked children into beds they suddenly no longer trusted. The Hayes sisters had disappeared without trace, without sound, without struggle. No ransom note, no suspects. The kind of crime that belonged in city shadows, not in a suburb where the loudest trouble had been trash cans left in the wrong place. Whispers rose quickly. Had the mother been careless? Was it trafficking? Was it something worse? The case became an infection under the town's skin. Years passed, but the wound never healed. Even the chalk drawings remained on the patio like ghosts refusing to fade. What was once a neighborhood of bake sales became a block where silence lived in every yard and every parent's eyes. For Detective John Carter, the case wasn't a file to shelf. It was a haunting. He had been the first responder that night, the one who held Rachel Hayes as she collapsed on her knees, screaming her daughter's names into the wind. Every lead collapsed in his hands. Drainage ditches, crawl spaces, endless hours of camera footage from corner stores and gas stations. Nothing. No prints. No pattern. No ransom. No sign. Carter was promoted during those years, but the promotion felt hollow. In the basement of his own home, he kept a cold case board lit with fluorescent glare, red strings crossing photos, a silent shrine to questions unanswered. Colleagues advised letting go. He couldn't. He replayed every detail, convinced that somewhere the silence hid a clue. He just didn't know yet that the clue wasn't human at all. It was 4 legs, a nose, and a bark no one ignored.
Titan entered Carter's life not as a miracle, but as a reassignment, a 90-pound German shepherd bred for military tracking transferred after his handler retired. At first, the bond was brittle. Titan was all instinct, little patience. Carter was all control, little trust. Together, they trudged through mud, frost, and night air on cases no one else wanted. Slowly, respect grew, earned in silence, sealed in sweat. Titan wasn't just another dog. His nose was precise, his focus unnerving. Where Carter doubted, Titan drove forward. It was through this partnership, hard-forged and imperfect, that the Hayes case sparked again. A routine canvass of Willow Creek, another missing person unrelated, had brought Carter back to the neighborhood. Titan had sniffed 5 homes without pause. Then he stopped cold. At number 314 Oak Ridge Avenue, across from the Hayes home, Titan stiffened, and for the first time in years, Carter's gut believed again. Walter Darrow, retired math teacher, widower, a man who kept to himself but occasionally volunteered at the local library. No record, no complaints, clean as a pressed shirt. His house looked the same, painted trim, neat hedges, quiet as always. When Carter knocked, Darrow answered in a cardigan, glasses low, words polite. Carter explained the routine welfare checks, asked if Titan could sweep the yard. Walter hesitated, coughed, declined, said he wasn't feeling well. Legally, Carter couldn't press. He nodded, took notes, walked away. But Titan didn't walk away. The dog's body remained tense, gaze locked toward the storm drain like a compass needle that refused to shift. Sometimes, suspicion isn't born from what's seen, but from what refuses to be unseen. Carter knew then that silence in Willow Creek was not an accident. It had a keeper, and that keeper had just closed the door in his face.
That night, something strange happened. Titan slipped his kennel latch, not with force, but with intent, as if guided by a mission no human had given him. By the time Carter found him, the dog was back at the same storm drain outside Walter Darrow's house. This time, Titan's low growl carried into the night air, steady, unyielding. He wasn't alerting, he was warning. Carter felt a cold clarity settle in. This was no coincidence. Instinct this sharp was evidence waiting to be written. Titan had chosen his ground, and Carter had to follow. For the first time in 4 years, there was a direction. Not a theory, not a whisper, not a rumor. Just a dog refusing to leave the scent of something hidden. Sometimes the smallest act, a slipped latch, a growl in the dark, isn't random. Sometimes it's the sound of truth pushing its way out. Carter dug into public records, searching for cracks in the perfection. And there they were. 2 years earlier, Darrow had filed permits for an HVAC system. The paperwork mentioned a basement level not present in the original floor plan. The contractor was out of state, unreachable. Neighbors remembered hearing odd sounds at night, dragging noises, faint laughter, even a lullaby sung off-key. They had brushed it off, pipes groaning, maybe television, nothing alarming in a quiet street that trusted itself too much. But for Carter, those dismissed whispers carried weight. He gathered every scrap of anomaly, Titan's behavior, permit discrepancies, neighbor accounts, and pressed for a search warrant. The request was thin, the evidence barely stitched, but the judge, remembering the Hayes case, signed. For Carter, it was the first time in years that paper and instinct aligned. The silence of Willow Creek was about to be broken wide open.
The morning was overcast, gray, restless. Carter stood in damp grass outside 314 Oak Ridge with Titan at his side. Behind them, uniformed officers waited. One carried a crowbar, another a clipboard with the warrant tucked beneath plastic. Across the street, curtains twitched. Neighbors peeked with coffee cups in hand, assuming this was about noise complaints or a drug bust. Nobody thought this was about the Hayes sisters. Their case was a tragedy buried in whispers, an old wound the town had stopped naming aloud. Carter knocked firm, 3 times. Footsteps shuffled inside. The door creaked open. Walter Darrow looked smaller in daylight, paler, hollow. Carter lifted the warrant, voice flat. This wasn't optional. For a moment, Darrow's hands twitched on the nod, but then he stepped aside. Titan surged forward the instant the door opened wide enough, nose already hunting for what had been hidden too long. Inside, the air was heavy, not moldy, but artificial, processed like a house trying to erase itself. Too clean. Titan swept through each room with robotic precision, pausing at the kitchen. There, he froze in front of a sliding pantry. Canned goods stood in military formation, every row perfect. Carter crouched, scanning for what didn't belong. A faint scuff at the baseboard. Fingers trailing along the paneling, Carter found it, an almost invisible seam. Officers unloaded shells, tin cans clattering against the counter. Within seconds, a recessed metal handle clicked under pressure. The wall shifted outward. Behind it, stairs descended into blackness. Titan growled deep, body rigid, blocking the descent. This wasn't a pantry. It wasn't even a basement. It was a tunnel designed for something else. The air that rose from below carried not the stench of decay, but something worse. Fear soaked into concrete. The flashlights swept across walls lined with thick insulation, layered to muffle sound. Beds stripped of springs sat directly on the floor to prevent squeaks. Toys scattered across the concrete were soft. Fabric blocks, rubber dolls, puzzles missing pieces. Even the toilet system was rigged to flush silently. Every detail engineered not for comfort, but for control. This was not a space built for living. It was a space built for hiding. Hiding noise. Hiding existence. The very air seemed to hum with absence, a silence so heavy it pressed against the ears. Titan padded ahead, nose twitching, body taut with unease. Carter's chest tightened with every step deeper. This was no accident. This was architecture with purpose, the kind that turned a suburban basement into a prison. In that silence, there were no screams, no cries, no laughter. Just 2 lives waiting, muted by design, for someone to finally hear. In the corner of the engineered room, beneath a threadbare blanket, 2 forms stirred. Flashlight beams revealed faces pale as candle wax, hair limp with years of neglect. Emily Hayes, once a bright 4-year-old, now skeletal. Beside her, Chloe Hayes, clinging so tight her knuckles blanched.
4 years missing, 4 years presumed gone, and here they were, alive but mute, fragile as paper. Rescuers expected tears, screams, joy, but silence clung to them, heavier than the blanket wrapped around their shoulders. They blinked against the light as if it were fire, recoiling from sudden brightness. Carter's throat closed, his eyes burning as Titan whined low, crouching close as if in recognition. 2 girls pulled from the dark, not by chance, but by the relentless nose of a dog who wouldn't look away. The world had forgotten them. Titan had not, and now daylight had to earn them back.
Above ground, cuffs clicked tight around Walter Darrow's wrists. He stood motionless, cardigan neat, eyes blank behind thick glasses. No thrashing, no pleading, no denial, just silence. When asked why, he finally spoke, calm, as if discussing weather. "They're mine. God gave them to me." Officers stiffened, rage crawling their voices, but Darrow's face remained void of guilt. Carter stared, fists clenched, every muscle tight with restraint. 4 years those girls had lived in darkness across the street, while neighbors waved politely, while Walter mowed his lawn. The man who taught algebra by day had built a soundless world by night. As squad doors slammed shut, Carter whispered to himself the only truth that mattered. 4 years underground. But the real weight wasn't in the arrest. It was in the girls, pale in daylight, silence stitched into their bones, beginning a road back that would not end here. The ambulance doors closed on Emily and Chloe as paramedics worked quietly. In the trauma unit, doctors charted malnutrition, speech regression, and trauma symptoms. Rachel Hayes arrived 2 hours later, collapsing at the sight of her daughters. She repeated their names like prayer beads, reaching for their hands. But the girls didn't reach back. Emily stared through her mother as if through glass. Chloe buried her face into Emily's side, trembling but silent. The reunion every mother dreams of was not the one Rachel received. 4 years had stolen recognition. Scent, voice, even touch were foreign to the daughters who had lived underground. Nurses wiped dirt from their skin in layers. Photographers camped outside, waiting for a happy ending. Inside, there was no celebration. There was only silence, thicker than before, a silence so complete it seemed to say, rescue is not the same as healing.
When forensic teams cataloged the basement, they found walls lined with crayon drawings, houses with crooked rooftops, stick figures with eyes scratched out, landscapes that had never existed. And among them, again and again, a dog. Sometimes brown, sometimes black, sometimes just ears and a nose, sketched with shaky lines. Beneath the drawings, written in uneven letters, "Our angel dog. We knew he'd come." Investigators stood stunned. The girls had never seen Titan before, yet here he was in their art, years before his nose brought Carter to the drain. Whether imagination or instinct, the drawings were a prophecy. Children, trapped in silence, had dreamed of a rescuer with fur and teeth, not words. In their underground world, hope had taken the shape of a German shepherd. And now that hope had stepped into their lives, flesh and blood, growl and bark, angel and savior all at once. Therapists warned against bringing Titan into the hospital room. Therapy dogs required gentleness, and Titan was all intensity. But when Emily began sketching dogs on the whiteboard, a nurse suggested it. Carter hesitated, then led Titan in. Rachel sat in the corner, reading aloud, her voice a ghost against her daughter's silence. But when Titan entered, both girls turned. Chloe slid off the bed, bare feet padding to the dog. She pressed her face into his fur, exhaling a breath she had been holding for 4 years. Emily followed, arms wrapping around his neck. "See," she whispered faintly, "I told you he was real." It was the first sound from her lips since rescue. Carter stood frozen, throat tight. The therapists called it a breakthrough. For Carter, it was something deeper. Titan had not only found the girls, he had pulled them back to the world of the living.
During therapy, Emily began drawing more than dogs. One afternoon, she sketched the basement. Beds, toilet, toys, all in careful detail. But on one corner, she marked a small box labeled "Don't Go." Carter studied the drawing, stomach tightening. Investigators returned to Darrow's house. Behind the staircase, a false panel gave way. Inside, a crawl space. Dust thick, silence deeper than the rest. In the center sat a red chair, a camping lantern, and 4 crates stacked with spiral notebooks and cassette tapes. A locked trunk opened to reveal Polaroid photographs, dozens of them. Emily and Chloe captured in sleep, in silence, in empty stares. On the back of each photo, the same phrase written in red ink: "They are mine." Carter stood in the crawl space, bile rising, fury burning. This wasn't confinement. This was obsession, ritualized. The Don't Go room wasn't just forbidden. It was where the darkness spoke. Forensic analysts played the tapes recovered from the crawl space. The footage was grainy. Walter Darrow sat before the camera, sermonizing into the lens. He called himself shepherd, spoke of protecting lambs from wolves. His words twisted scripture into justification. At one point, he adjusted the camera toward a cradle in the corner. On its edge, carved deep into wood, were the words, "Child of the Ark." The room of investigators went silent. The phrase wasn't random. It echoed with something older. FBI profiler Lillian Reyes stepped in. She had seen similar language in files buried deep, connected to a defunct compound in northern Arizona. A cult once called the Ark of Divine Protection. It was raided years earlier, its theology scattered like seeds. Now those seeds had sprouted in a quiet man's basement. Walter Darrow hadn't invented his religion. He had inherited it and kept it alive in silence.
At the recovery home, volunteer June Parker brought Emily a shoebox of crafts. Inside were blank index cards. Emily froze, then whispered, "These are the same." Confused, June asked, Emily explained. Walter had made them write answers. Strangers' prayers delivered on slips of paper, collected by Walter. He would pass the cards to the girls, instructing them to kneel, drink bitter red wine, and wait for the listener to speak. Their answers were written on those cards, dictated by Walter, sometimes blurred by hallucinations. They weren't prayers. They were a product, sold to donors who paid in cash through a private box. Investigators followed the trail. Records showed years of donations, names of church members, business leaders, even politicians. Hundreds of people had bought divine words written by 2 imprisoned children, and nobody had asked where the voices came from. They believed because faith blinded them to truth. Investigators traced donations funneled through post office boxes, shell accounts, and handwritten ledgers. What they uncovered was staggering. Churches had funneled offerings, CEOs had mailed checks, local officials had written personal notes requesting divine favor. Each transaction tied back to Walter's basement. The children's stolen voices had been monetized into a cottage industry. Prosecutors added charges: wire fraud, mail fraud, religious coercion. The case was no longer about kidnapping alone. It was about exploitation cloaked in holiness. As Carter read through the donor lists, bile rose in his throat. These were pillars of the community, people respected and trusted, and all had looked away, content with answers that required no questions. It wasn't just Walter's basement that had trapped Emily and Chloe. It was the world outside, willing to pay for silence. For Carter, it was a new kind of rage. For Titan, it was still a scent to follow.
When Walter Darrow's trial opened,
Media descended. Headlines screamed. Cameras fought for space. But Carter didn't sit in the courtroom. He stayed close to the girls instead. Their healing mattered more than verdicts. One morning, he presented Titan with a new vest stitched in gold and blue. Hero Dog, Unit 314. Emily traced the letters with her small finger, nodding solemnly. Days later, during therapy, Titan accidentally passed gas. It was small, ridiculous, but it shattered the silence. Emily fell off her chair laughing. Chloe giggled until tears rolled down her cheeks. Even the therapist broke down crying from relief. The laughter spread, a sound long buried, finally unearthed. Healing didn't arrive all at once. It crept in sideways, disguised as a dog's silly mistake. For the first time, Carter believed the Hayes sisters might one day live beyond silence, carrying not just scars, but also joy. As therapy deepened, Emily revealed the most chilling detail. Walter had warned them about the listener, a presence he claimed would punish noise. If they cried, if they screamed, the listener would hear and bring wrath. Sometimes Walter made them sit outside the crawl space, waiting in silence for the listener to show truth. Emily remembered whispers through the wall. Chloe trembled, recalling it. This wasn't just captivity. It was conditioning, a theology of fear drilled into children too young to fight it. Carter's stomach twisted as he listened to the girls explain. Walter wasn't acting in isolation. His rules, his rituals, even the term listener, mirrored language from cult compounds. For Carter, this was no longer a closed case. It was an opening into something larger, darker, organized. Titan sat beside him, steady. The dog had pulled 2 children from silence, but how many others remained unheard?
To help process nightmares, Emily was given a dream journal, but her entries were not only dreams. She sketched a building with a red roof, white walls, and prayer flags, a stone well, a barn, a circle of stones in desert sand. Rachel brought the drawings to Carter. He stared, recognizing patterns of real landscapes. Reyes compared them to federal land maps. Hours of cross-referencing finally clicked. An abandoned compound outside Holbrook, Arizona. Locals called it the Red Chapel. Once owned by a breakaway sect, sold off, forgotten in files. Carter's pulse quickened. Emily's dreams weren't fantasy. They were memories, fragments of places seen in captivity or whispered into her mind. This wasn't just about Walter's basement. The Red Chapel was real, standing silent in desert dust. And if it was real, then so were the shadows it still held. The hunt was no longer local, it was national. Federal teams moved under gray skies, tactical gear, armored trucks, canine units advancing across desert ground. The Red Chapel loomed ahead, roof faded, flags tattered, a shell against the horizon. Inside, dust-layered pews. Behind the pulpit, stairs descended into stone. The air cooled as they entered. Underground rooms stretched, carved by hand. Small beds lined walls. Crayon drawings clung with tape. Calendars marked days. No children, only silence. In one room, a cassette still sat in a recorder. They played it back. A woman's voice sang, soft like a lullaby. He will come when the others sleep. He will take the listener and the seer. Only those who are pure may stay. The ark will be ready. At the end, a child coughed faintly. Agents froze. Titan's ears flicked, body taut. The rooms were empty but not abandoned. Somewhere, children were still being moved like pawns.
2 days later, Homeland Security tracked tire marks north of the compound. A converted RV was found parked near Moab. Agents breached. Inside, 5 children blinked at the light, malnourished, sedated. Among them, Lena Parker, missing nearly 2 years. The rescue echoed the Hayes sisters, except this time,
Titan was waiting. As Carter entered the hospital room, Lena reached for Titan, clutching fur she'd never touched before. She didn't know his name, but instinct recognized safety. For the first time, Carter felt the threads tie together. Walter had not been a lone predator. He had been part of a network, silent, ritualized, dangerous. Titan's bark in a storm drain had cracked open something vast. Each child saved was another truth pulled into daylight. But for every life rescued, Carter wondered how many more sat in silence, waiting for a dog that might never come. The fight had only begun. Back in Willow Creek, healing rippled outward. The town that once whispered now gathered in daylight. At the community park, beneath the oak tree where candlelight vigils had once burned, a plaque was placed. It read, "The Listening Tree, for voices we chose to hear." Beneath, 3 names: Emily Hayes, Chloe Hayes, Titan. Families came, touching the engraved letters. Children ran freely again. Rachel wept quietly, holding her daughter's hands. The town's silence had once been a shroud. Now it became a vow to never stop listening. The Hayes sisters were no longer shadows. They were children in light, chasing butterflies across grass. Titan lay at their side, tail sweeping the dirt. For Carter, it was proof that survival was possible, even in places where silence once ruled. For the girls, it was more than a plaque. It was the world's promise not to look away again.
Just as the town breathed easier, a package arrived at the precinct. No return address. Inside, a crumpled notebook filled with crude drawings. Underground rooms, stick figure children lined in rows, a strange symbol, an ear inside a circle. On the last page, words scrawled in shaky hand. There are still more. Carter stared at it, pulse heavy. Titan shifted beside him, ears alert. The message was clear. Walter Darrow was behind bars, but the network lived on. Somewhere, basements still existed. Somewhere, silence still swallowed children whole. The package wasn't only a warning. It was a taunt, a challenge left at Carter's door. The case that had begun with 2 missing sisters had become a doorway into a shadowed network stretching far beyond Willow Creek. And Carter knew what Titan already understood. The silence wasn't finished speaking. They had to keep listening because others still waited in the dark. A year later, Rachel sent a postcard. On it, the ocean stretched wide. "We finally dipped our toes," she wrote. "Chloe ran from the waves. Emily ran straight into them. Thank you for helping us find joy again. Love, all 3 of us, and Titan too." Carter pinned it beside a faded missing poster of the sisters. He sat on his porch that night, Titan at his feet, the dog's breath steady against the quiet. The world was not fixed. Shadows remained. Files still waited, but 2 girls were laughing in the surf. That mattered. Titan shifted, ears flicking toward the dark. Always listening, always watching. Not all heroes speak. Some simply refuse to stop listening. And sometimes that's enough to pull voices from silence into the light. For Carter, for Willow Creek, for Emily and Chloe, the story was unfinished, but the healing had begun.